Yeah, good morning. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech. More specifically, this is Community Matters, and even more specific than that, the handsome fellow is Burt Lum. Hi, Burt. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jay. Thanks.
So Burt is the Hawaii's Broadband Strategy Officer, and we're going to talk about broadband and strategy, and we're going to talk about his article that appeared a couple of days ago in the Honolulu Star Advertiser. Let's begin with, so what is the Broadband Strategy Officer in the state of Hawaii, Burt?
Well, we only have half an hour, so I think I'll try to keep it short.
Okay.
When I took the job in 2018, what we were focused on was looking at some key strategic infrastructure that should be built to kind of help ensure that Hawaii stays connected to the broadband network. And a lot of my work was around, educating key leaders, legislators around the importance of carrier neutral cable landing to ensure, connectivity to the global network and make sure that the trans-Pacific fiber cables would land here. And then in 2018, 2019, we weren't really successful at getting any appropriation from the legislature. So, we continued to march along and try to get some communities connected that weren't connected. And I was looking at, this is toward the end of 2019, looking at some of the communities that were, considered kind of marginalized. And I had the benefit of working with an organization called the Internet Society. And with the Internet Society and their willingness to not only fund, but they were looking at doing something called the Indigenous Connectivity Summit here in Hawaii back in November of 2019. So we actually worked with them, got the elements of putting a community network together and built one up at Puho'onua o Waimanalo. And so that was kind of the first project, I guess, that we were able to fulfill, basically without any state money, because we didn't get any money, appropriated. So, going back to your question, what is the role of the strategy officer? The role of the strategy officer is try to move the agenda without, without getting overly maybe obstructed by the obstacles along the way. And in our case, the obstacle was money. And so we were able to, get Puho'onua Waimanalo connected, and we worked with Hawaiian Telecom and a number of other vendors that the Internet Society brought over as a result of the Indigenous Connectivity Summit, and hooked them up to a wireless transmission central point in the community, and we created a kind of a hub and spoke of access points around the community, which then enabled probably about 60 to 80 people to get connectivity as a result of the fiber optics that was actually available along the street. And so that really helped to enable that community to get better connectivity for doing distance learning and remote work and all the good stuff. And that's that's November 2019. And then in 2020, we start to approach the legislature in a similar fashion, trying to see if we can get some appropriation. We're kind of indicated that we might not be able to get any. So and we were, some legislators were very supportive. We did an information briefing. We kind of talked about Indigenous connectivity. And of course, this is the infamous March 2020. And in March 25th of 2020, basically as a result of the shutdown of schools and basically the economy, we convened something called the Broadband Hui. And the Broadband Hui became a convening place for basically stakeholders in broadband throughout the community, interested in how do we fix the problem with connectivity across our communities. And these communities could be rural communities, it could be homeless communities, it could be disenfranchised communities. It was just everybody who was now, facing a situation of not having any connectivity to either learn or work or get, health services. And so we committed to meeting every week. And tomorrow will be the 48th week we've consecutively met as a result of the broadband Hui.
Almost a year,
so, yeah. It'll be a year pretty soon. And what we committed to was, not only broadband from an infrastructure standpoint, but broadband from an equity standpoint. So we're now looking at broadband and digital equity, and I think that has really resonated with a lot of people, because now they have come to sort of realize that, having connectivity is not a luxury, it's like a necessity. And so how do we, the state, really get, sort of embrace this and do what is necessary to achieve the goals of digital equity? And so that's kind of the path that, I've sort of taken over the last, going on, 4 years now, right? So, right now where we are is that we're still in the pandemic. We're still working our way through the issues that we became very aware of as a result of now all basically working from wherever. But we are now at a point where we're not alone in recognizing the problem. So when I started, it was like I was like a lone voice in the forest, and now it's a little bit more like we have state leaders that really recognize the need, but we also have federal leadership as well as federal monies that are flowing to the states that recognize this problem. So now it becomes—
Is this part of COVID relief or something else?
No, it is part of COVID relief. And so in the first CARES Act, we were asked to come up with some projects, but they had to be very specific around COVID relief. And then we came up with a small project. It was about $131,000 for a nonprofit on the Big Island to provide COVID relief to some of the homeless communities on the Big Island. But then at the end of 2020, President Trump signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. And in it, there were some specific line items looking at funding broadband. I'll give you some examples. There was a line item for Native American tribes as well as Hawaiian homelands. And in Hawaii, what happens on the mainland with tribal lands is that there's a tribal nation that has a relationship with the federal government because they're federally recognized. In Hawaii, the federal government recognizes Hawaiian homelands, but there's no native Hawaiian recognition. But nevertheless, the appropriation accommodated for the recognition of Hawaiian homelands, and we were able to get Department of Hawaiian Homelands to be recognized as sort of a recipient. And so they will receive $30 million for broadband deployment on Hawaiian homelands. So that's one example. There's another example of something I'm working on called the Emergency Broadband Benefit. And that's nationwide. It's a $3.2 billion benefit that anybody that has is low income, if you were subject to, let's say, unemployment for 6 months over the last year, you could qualify. So Hawaii probably has something like maybe 200,000 people that could potentially qualify for this benefit. And the benefit boils down to like a $50 credit on your internet bill. But so it behooves us, Hawaii, to figure out a way to get the word out, get people to sign up, and try to bring as much of that $3.2 billion to Hawaii. I estimate that, if we could probably get, 200,000 people to sign up, the potential is that we could bring in about $40 million for their broadband, sort of broadband benefit, and that's just money off of their bill. Now, this bill, this broadband benefit only is going to last until the $3.2 billion pot lasts. So it may only last for 4 to 6 months, but nevertheless, we're going to try to get as much of that as possible and get it into the hands of the potential participants.
Well, it's fabulous. You've been real active, Burt, in finding money. But I didn't hear you say that the 2020 or 2021 legislature gave any money for this. Did it? Is it now giving money?
No, we're still working. We're still working through the session. The 2020 session, we were unsuccessful at getting any money. In 2021, there's a couple of bills I'm tracking. There's a couple of broadband office bills, and so I'm keenly interested in where a broadband office could get established. We have a bill that's still in play that establishes it in DBED, which is the business Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. There's another bill to actually set up a broadband infrastructure grant program. Both of those bills aren't. We're not 100% clear whether they will be funded. So we understand that there's a tight budget crunch in the state government. So we understand that it's going to be tough to fund any of these projects. So my plan is to put in the legislation, at least maybe get it into statute, and then for the interim, try to work with our state legislators, see if there's anything left over. Maybe there's something left over, so we can get a little kickstart, and then also look at federal funding and whenever some of these grants start to flow into Hawaii, they usually have some allocation to the administration of those grants. So at least there's something to kind of get us off the ground. So it won't be working with zero.
Well, recently in January was the annual PTC conference, Pacific Telecommunications Conference. I'm sure that Hawaii Broadband would have an interest in that conference. And I don't know actually for sure whether it was virtual or in person, but I wonder if anything that was happening in that conference with the players who come from far and wide and like Hawaii a lot, any of them could offer anything or, be supportive in some way.
I think, okay, so to answer your question, it was virtual. And I participated on a panel that was put together, and it revolved primarily around indigenous connectivity. The panel, in terms of the virtual kind of conference, it's not like the person to person and face to face conferences where you can sort of run into people and have sort of side meetings. So there wasn't really that much opportunity to catch up with some of the Trans-Pacific fiber players. And usually those folks do show up at these conferences. And what I've done in the past is kind of get a sense as to what their planning horizon looks like for any Trans-Pacific projects going across the Pacific and whether there's interest in landing in Hawaii. But that, with that said, the important piece for me is how do we get our cable landing project started, right? And we were able to get some degree of start with some money that we were able to do an environmental assessment. We sort of expanded the cable landing project from a study standpoint to include all 4 major islands. So we got Kauai, Oahu, Maui, and the Big Island. I did go after an EDA grant, the Economic Development Administration grant, to see if we could get that funded, but was unsuccessful at getting funds from the EDA. But nevertheless, I think what we were told by the EDA was that if we at least from the state standpoint, put some money into doing a little better job in establishing the site locations and do a site survey and do some preliminary work about the site acquisition. And these were all on state land. So we've already got them identified, and we could, do a little bit better in terms of the site surveys. And if we were to do that, we'd probably get a better chance of getting some monies to get our project going. So we're looking at trying to kickstart that project with some survey money and get some permitting work started.
Well, closing the digital divide is important, but of course, everything is a function of the speed and capacity of the pipes coming to Hawaii, as you said, and the Pacific Cable. My recollection last time I was looking into this was Hawaiian Telcom was in a consortium to lay another cable across the Pacific that would serve Hawaii, and I had the impression that they were just about done last time I looked into it. And that would assume that there were landing sites, and it would assume that by now we have the benefit of that cable. What's the status?
So in 2017, the project that I think you're referring to is called CUS, SEA, Southeast Asian to US, and Hawaiian Telcom was a partner in that, and that landed in 2017. And then right after that, in 2018, the project that came up from New Zealand, Australia, called Hawaii, that landed in Hawaii as well. And so, there's connectivity that's available on those systems because they all ultimately go to the West Coast of the U.S. What we're trying to do is, with this cable landing that we're proposing, it's carrier neutral. And typically when the private sector folks do their cable landings, they basically build it to accommodate their one cable. So, in terms of future connectivity, what we wanted to do was build a cable landing that had multiple, what we call cable entry points. And so rather than just have one entry point, we would look at building 4 entry points, and that would accommodate the Trans-Pacific as well as possibly inter-island fiber systems that could benefit from this carrier neutral cable landing. So that enables kind of a more robust, oceanic Trans-Pacific inter-island fiber network. And what we do, and this is kind of where the strategy comes in, if we are able to lower the barrier for anybody wanting to do a cable system by having it already basically built and provided, then the attraction would be more conducive, right? You wouldn't have to think about, if you're thinking about doing a project, like what's it going to cost to land in Hawaii? Do I need a partner? I need to do all this permitting and surveying and engineering. It's already done. And so that's the whole idea behind doing this carrier neutral cable landing. And we were actually successful at getting the federal delegation to recognize the strategic importance of that. And they even, get this, Jay, they even put it in the Consolidated Appropriations Act. So in there, some of the broadband money that is considered infrastructure that could get built for broadband includes the words carrier neutral cable landing.
Oh, terrific. Perfect.
Yeah,
well, that's a step forward, for
yeah.
sure. Now you got to actually get it done. But we tarry, I think, because we still have our primary subject to discuss, and that is your article about diversification of the economy. I'm very curious about, exactly how you see that unfolding. As if the proposition, and you and I have talked about this over the years, the proposition is that if you have better broadband, you have better prospects in developing a tech industry, and therefore finally diversifying the economy. Can you step us through your article and answer that?
So, Jay, I think we both agree that from a foundational standpoint, you need to establish a robust broadband network. And just like whether you're building a freeway or an airport, in order for planes to land here, you're going to have a pretty decent airport so that whether it's coming from Asia or the Pacific, it can land here. So in terms of the broadband infrastructure, it's not just cable landings, right? It's not just Trans-Pacific. It's inter-island. It's backhaul. It's the terrestrial backhaul. It's also getting out to the rural communities. And how do we distribute quality broadband to the rural communities? It's not like just because they're rural, they just get the crumbs, right? How do we get the high-speed quality broadband to the rural communities? And how do we now not only talk about access and infrastructure, but how do we now up the game for digital literacy? And so digital literacy is a key element. And that's why it became really important for the Broadband Hui, which we've convened, to look at putting out something called the Digital Equity Declaration. And so through that, we identified, and we call it Broadband for All. It's an ALL stands for Access, Literacy, and Livelihood. So the idea is that it's not just the infrastructure, it's the literacy and getting people up to speed with being not only digitally literate, but computer literate. So as we build the learning and the experience and the skill set, so and we're talking Keiki, right? So we're not talking like tomorrow we're going to turn the lights on and boom, we're going to be like this competitive digital economy, but we want to get there. In order to get there, we need to set the foundation for digital equity. And if we can bring everybody up to speed to be really proficient at using this technology, and I'm talking, get to the point where you can create content, create applications, do data analytics, do things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then we can start to, have a workforce. And then at the same time, I'm trying to work with some of the, the typical cloud providers and see if we can, encourage the cloud platforms to doing something out in Hawaii, whether it's a data center or edge computing or something that starts to leverage the 21st century technologies that we're all kind of hearing about now, right? And so if we don't get involved with that stuff now, we're going to be totally, behind the 8 ball. I mean, we're sort of already behind the 8 ball. I mean, and let's face it, Jay. I mean, we're in the middle of the Pacific, so nobody around us is going to help us. We have to build this, ourselves, and we have to bring everybody up to speed, together, right? So the plan, Jay, is that we get infrastructure, we get this digital equity declaration going, we got people committed to digital literacy, and we're talking pretty widespread across the entire state. And can we get to a place where we can declare, and this is part of the declaration, can we declare, and we're shooting for 2024, and this is a target because, back in 1824, King Kamehameha III said, Hawaii is going to be a nation of literacy. So in 2024, 200 years later, we want to be able to declare that Hawaii is a state of digital literacy. And so that's kind of our goal. And we're going to be establishing a baseline. We're going to do some assessments. We're going to see how we track along the road to 2024 and see how we're doing. And let's try to get everybody kind of up to speed. And then if we can get from the rural communities and build robust broadband and attract the cloud providers, heck, maybe we'll get something happening on the neighbor islands. Maybe Big Island will be the next place for a data center, right? And maybe we could do remote work from from the Big Island and really create some diversified economy by getting all these smart tech people to look at building applications right here in Hawaii. So that's the plan, Jay.
People don't realize, and they should, that fast broadband, quality broadband lets you do so much more than broadband that's not so fast and not so high quality. And if you were in the middle of nowhere and you had fast broadband, you could do you could do it like anybody in any city in the world. P.S. I just want to tell you that in the last week or so, we've had talk shows on Zoom with Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, and with Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and it was really fast. And
Hmm.
my reaction to what you're saying is not only do we have to catch up on that and be as fast as either of those and more, but also this is an ongoing strategy. This isn't just a couple of years and we get to a level point. It's we're always in global competition, right? So once you get to
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
benchmark, you have to keep on doing it.
That's right. That's right. And I think we people ask me, "Well, so what does Hawaii uniquely offer the rest of the world in terms of whether it's the applications or the content or their view on technology?" And I gotta look at how we incorporate things like indigenous knowledge into the technology that we use, because we are really an island, a chain of islands in the middle of the Pacific, very very dependent, right, on a lot of externalities. But are we able to take lessons that we've learned here? And I think going back to what was Hawaii like hundreds of years ago, they were pretty self-sufficient. So are there ways that we can leverage technology that helps us to become more self-sufficient? So even there people have been talking to me about even fish ponds or lo'i or just sustainable farming, but leveraging technology to do it better.
Mhm.
And can we do it uh, in a way that is more, sort of regenerative and sustainable? And can we leverage technology to achieve that? And of course, if you did use technology to do it, you probably obviously will need some broadband as a platform to achieve that.
Yeah, it sounds like you also need political will and commitment in the legislature to give you regular funding, not just in crisis, but on a regular basis for your office and for the implementation of the plans you design. But the other thing that
Yeah.
strikes me, Bert, is and I think it's inherent in what you're saying, is that building the broadband by itself is not enough. You have to lift all corners of the blanket. And that means you have to educate everybody. You have to provide them with computers, especially in neighborhoods where people don't have so much money. And you have to train them on the computers. You have to show them, open their eyes to the prospects so they can get involved in this and realize that this enables them, to make a decent living. It enables them to extend out of the state. I mean, all these things that create the creative possibilities are enormous, but you have to educate people, not only in the fact of the broadband, not only in the computers and the computer technology, but in the possibilities. That's not so easy, Bert.
It's not so easy, but Jay, I think what we do at this moment in time in Hawaii's history is that we have a lot of people saying what you're saying and recognizing that no one person can do this all. And it has to be a community effort. And we all have to work together toward this goal. And I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that we are able to come together and recognize, the sort of this shared vision and bring the resources in people's respective camps to how do we achieve that, and with people's specialties, can we move the needle? And so my job is to continue to kind of foster that environment for collaboration, and just hope that we can lead the way in achieving this diversified economy. And if I can, if I can uh, contribute to that effort, I would feel quite pleased that I made a difference.
Well, you've contributed to that effort all your life, as long as I've known you. You contribute every week on Bud Marks Cafe. It's really remarkable how much you have done up to this point, and you haven't stopped or slowed down for a minute, Bert. So, and this
Yeah,
is a
well,
great possibility.
like my article said, I endeavor to persevere. So I will continue this fight as long as I can continue to fight.
Okay, well, speaking for at least part of the community, we're with you, and we want to see this happen. And we're self-interested in the sense that, we want to see Hawaii have broadband sufficient to maintain its competitive position in the world and improve that. But we also want to see all these kids who might otherwise have to leave the state, stay here and do AI and do all kind of cloud computing and writing apps. There's no reason why we can't do that. We got to do that. So good
Yeah,
for you,
yeah.
Bert.
And no, and Jay, thanks for having me on, and thanks for helping to continue to help tell that story. Because you you and I, we're like the old timers, and we got to keep this voice alive.
You bet. Burt Lum, star of stage and screen and star of technology in Hawaii and broadband strategy. Thank you so much for coming around. I hope we can do this again, and good luck in all of your efforts.
Mahalo, Jay. Anytime, whenever you call, I answer the phone.
Great. Thanks. Take care. Mahalo.